Good evening and welcome to the Public Services Committee. Call this meeting to order. It's Tuesday, December 13th. Approval of the minutes. Anyone want to approve the minutes?
I would move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second?
Second, Salbert.
Thanks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those say nay. Motion carries. We will start with, actually, inadvertently, the open discussion was accidentally left off of, so with your approval, I will add that if there's no objections for open discussion. Any objections? If none, open discussion. Anyone have anything for open discussion? Okay, easy enough. We will move into our presentation then. Our presentation this evening is an overview of TIF ordinances by Brent O'Neill, Economic Development Manager. Brent, take it away.
All right. Good evening, Brent O'Neill with Community Development. I'm going to just start by saying it was a conversation with Councilor Erickson and David Bixler 7, 8, 9 months ago that kind of necessitated the desire to come back to the council in December or January, kind of on an annual basis going forward so we can provide a snapshot of TIF. I, in this particular case, decided I know I could talk for an hour or longer probably about it, and I know you probably have questions that could take us all different ways, but with at least 3 new councilor members on the committee, I thought maybe I'd just keep it at a higher, kind of broader level. We could answer any questions you have, and certainly we're always open to have conversations with you individually or come back for specific questions. So I am going to keep it high level this go around. In its simplest form, tax increment financing is an incentive that the city uses. It's one of the tools that we do have in our toolbox to incentivize private development and investment in our community. It really can be categorized into 3 broad uses. It can help retain existing businesses in our community that might find more attractive options elsewhere. A big use in Sioux Falls is that third bullet point up there, the second use, really the redevelopment projects that we're going through in our core downtown as a primary target area for tax increment financing. And often you find those areas are going through periods of disinvestment, and therefore some revitalization is needed. And then the third is that kind of that big economic development category where you're attracting projects and investment in your community to grow the economic base. When we look at TIF, it's both a policy decision of the elected officials, but it's also a platform that we follow and get our guidance from state law on. I will not get into these. I will not read them. However, I wanted you to be aware of 5 kind of key things that go into the TIF planning process when we're doing that. That's, identifying the city's powers to use TIF, identifying the boundaries of a district that encompasses certain properties that either contribute or participate or benefit from the TIF. The fact that TIF falls into really 2 broad needs. One is an economic development need, and one is, again, that redevelopment area. So that's a statutory requirement that we identify those. The project plan is a fairly lengthy document that very much outlines how we're going to use TIF in that particular case, and then the actual expenses that will be reimbursed through the TIF. It's a lot longer statute, but those are 5 things from statute where we get a lot of our guidance. There are many projects in Sioux Falls that happen. We talk to them, almost on a daily basis, as does our planning department and others at the city. But there are select projects that do struggle to become reality without some sort of partnership or incentive being offered, and that's when we are asked to consider TIF. Sioux Falls has used it on a very limited basis. We've done 20 TIF districts since we did our first one in 1989. Comparatively, a peer city of ours, Rapid City, is pushing 80 TIF districts. A city like Omaha has done over 300. We've often talked about the amount of investment that happens in our community, and we are a strong, thankfully strong economic engine right now, and so we haven't had to use TIF on a regular basis like other cities may have, but there have been times where it has been appropriate. Of those 20 TIF districts, created since 1989. 15 of those have been in our core, in our downtown area. 5 have been in locations throughout the city, and then 13 of those districts are active. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but In general, what active means is that there are still activities going on with that TIF, whether it be an actual construction project or whether the TIF is still generating revenue that's being put back into the project. If they're not active, that more or less means that the TIF no longer exists. The common expenses that you almost often see with TIF approvals in the past, and certainly as we evaluate TIFs in the future, these three broad categories are where you typically run into trouble making projects work, and that's where the TIF incentive can play a part. When you're talking about redeveloping property that may have had pollution issues in the past and it's just not feasible to develop on those properties without cleaning up that land, that would be a use. There are certain just site preparation costs, demolition of older structures, even unsuitable grading of sites, so you have to get a site level or more in line with the surrounding environment. And then public infrastructure, street, sewer, water, parking can be a component, and there's other elements of public infrastructure and public improvements that can be considered. That gets me to the list of the 13 active TIF districts. 1 through 4 have certainly come and gone, and then a couple between 5 and 10 have come and gone as well. But then TIF districts 10 through 20 are all active. I am going to make a broad statement about TIFs 5 through 14, and then have some more individual comments on those remaining 6 TIF districts. Projects 5 through 14, I'd be happy to explain any of those. We do have some information on our website, what year those were created, what they were used for, or even a little picture of the project that was undertaken. But all of those projects have been completed and are now really in the TIF repayment stage. TIF, as you recall, can be used for up to 20 years to incentivize a project. And so those projects are complete but are still in that 20-year window where there are tax increment revenues coming back to the projects. TIF 15 is a Sanford Sports Complex. That project is largely complete, but that was also a very, pardon the pun, complex project that involves several buildings. And so actually everything that was required has been done there, but the city is doing some things out there with restroom and playground this coming spring that would be eligible, as are a couple things that perhaps Sanford is still considering out there as well. By meeting the requirements that they did need to meet, though, they are also in the repayment phase of the TIF. Hidden Hills was one that was on an abandoned piece of, not abandoned, but an underutilized piece of property that really hasn't developed in 70 years and it's been in the core of our city. It was originally created in 2012. We amended it with the council's approval in 2015, and that ultimately built 3 apartment projects in the core of our city. So that project is just really getting to the point of opening up now. That has not yet entered a phase where they are receiving the receipts from the TIF district. TIF 17 is often called the Costco TIF, and while that's accurate in some respects, Costco wasn't impetus for creating it. Ultimately, Costco did not receive any funding for it, just as the way the project laid out. That was originally created as a backstop for a Williams pipeline site that we had very little clear information on how contaminated the soil was. So the TIF district was really created as a surety blanket to know that if there was trouble, we had a way to offset those costs. Ultimately, just to use round numbers, potential impact out there could have been as much as $5 million to clean up that site. We did ultimately look at about $1 million going to clean up parts of that site. There are, if you recall, 2 pieces of that TIF district. One was for the Costco piece, and then the other was about a 300-unit apartment complex. And that apartment complex did have a little dirtier soil and did need a little more mitigation. TIF 18 would really fit into the same category as those first 7 I addressed. It's a project on North Phillips Avenue that wrapped up and opened in 2014 and then is now in that 20-year payment period. Third Avenue Lofts was approved by the council in 2015. That's across the street from Sunshine. That's a project that did involve a series of different financing mechanisms, including TIF and some programs at the state level to provide affordable housing. That process that they're working through at the state level does require some time and bringing a lot of partners together. So we do anticipate them breaking ground early or middle of next year. And then TIF 20 was also approved by the council in 2015. That's the Washington Square project, and that's when we all drive by when we leave this building, or can at least see from this building, and that's in the middle of construction. So that is an update on where those 20 or 13 active TIF districts are. I will pause and open it up for any questions.
Any questions from the council in regards to any of the TIFs or the process? The intent really was to kind of give a 101 of what's out there, where we are, and kind of what we use them for. Councilor Staley, do you have any questions?
Well, and this is something when I was running for city council, I had discussions with all sorts of people. Some think they're good things, some things they shouldn't be used. So I still have a lot of questions about the mechanics of this. Sure. Are they always a 20-year window, or?
20 years is the maximum, and we oftentimes find that the TIFs that are approved by the council or in reality become TIFs that last less than 20 years. So the Costco, Williams Pipeline TIF, for example, will ultimately be a 4 to 5 year time frame.
But so we don't always go for this isn't always a blighted property, a blighted situation.
They can be used for economic development. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Councilor Stark.
Excuse me. Brett, usually TIFs are driven by the city. What consideration do counties and school districts that are in that area, because I know that it affects their income, are they usually included in the process, or do we tell them afterwards? Or
sure.
How does that work?
Sure. We are required, and well, I'll start with the requirement. We are required to provide a written letter to the county and school district, and actually all taxing entities. So in a lot of cases, there's a water district that would fit in that category also. And that's prior to the approval process. It actually goes to both the Planning Commission and the City Council at the city level. So we're required to do that before even the Planning Commission piece. We do, and it's really been a process that's been evolving, but we want to make sure we're as proactive and as formative as possible with our partners at the county and school district. So we do also offer a meeting with their full boards and commissions to talk about the details of a project, and that, again, is a prelude to coming to the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Staley.
Do municipalities, and is this a possibility that you'd ever open up a TIF to a residential situation?
Yeah, I think on TIF, as both a staff and elected officials that make the final decision, we always want to look at every option that makes sense for the community, is feasible and meets state law. Residential does have some challenges as far as like a tract residential development would go, related to some of the state law limits on using it for strictly residential projects. And I'm probably speaking a little out of school on some of the legal side of it, but there would be some considerations we need to look at if we were to do that type of development. But
if I may, we do have a couple of TIFs that are used for multifamily residential. So it's the Third Avenue Lofts, Phillips Avenue Lofts, but not the traditional single family. I don't think we've ever done one for that.
Yeah, I was talking about like a single family.
Single family, right.
Yeah. But we can look into that, and we just haven't explored it very much in the past.
Any other questions from the council?
What is the process, again, a developer or project has to go through for approval? Where does it start, or, I mean, just in a nutshell?
Sure. There is an application process. The majority of the TIFs you saw out there did not go through that application process. It was a process we started in 2013 or 14, just to kind of streamline, create a consistent path to approval. So that very first step is that application process. When I say it's the very first step, there's an application fee of $2,500 that goes with that. So we have been very open, with anyone that's interested or wants to talk about it, as far as having a conversation or two, prior to that investment in the application process. Once the application process is in place, there's a handful of things that are important. We're going to get our legal team involved. We're going to, start talking about the project details. There's a very significant analysis that goes into it from our point of view. We want to, really use TIF for those projects that truly need it and at the level that's truly needed for the project. So there's that analysis piece. And then when we get very comfortable about bringing a TIF forward and at a certain level, we're going to start talking about those approval chains that we've got to go through. And we're going to talk with our own internal team. Does it all make sense? We're going to talk to, we're going to get those letters and those meetings to the county and school district. We are going to get the council a heads up memo on what's being considered. And then we go to the planning commission, and then we go to the city council. And then that final step of being at the city council is where you have the decision to make on approving it or not.
Right. Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Sure can.
The projects you went through that are finished, can you speculate? Is it a guess, or could you say how many would be here if the TIF was not offered, or if we did not approve that? You just assume that was a key to getting them to.
Yeah, I'll speak to the 13 on this list.
Okay.
And I've been involved with 11 of those 13. 13. I mean that is one of the key criteria for us is, and we call it the but-for test, that this project won't happen but for TIF.
Great, thank you.
And if I can ask a couple, do you have another question?
Oh, just
Councilor?
one more.
Go ahead.
How many TIFs are applied for each year, and how many are given out? And I can see that we haven't had any, but generally, each year, how many people are asking for those?
It varies year to year, and as far as the application goes as our true measure, every one that applies is really entitled to come through the full process, and that means to the city council. So in short, you've seen as a council every TIF that has been applied for, and every TIF that has made it to the council has been approved. So that long answer becoming the short answer is these 20. I will say there was one that applied and quickly rescinded. So there'd be 21.
Oh, so you don't have like every year there's not 3 people applying?
Correct. Yeah, I mean we've had, even in the last few years, we had a couple years where none came forward or none wanted to come forward.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I think the key to that, too, is that there's always conversations taking place.
Correct.
And that you've been an open door to have people come in that if they want to start talking about the process, that you welcome them to start that process instead of saying, okay, leave your application and the check at the door, and then we will talk to you.
Absolutely.
That's not the practice. The practice really is, let's start talking about your project and see if we have other tools, if there's any other incentive that can work based on what tools you have in the toolbox.
Correct.
As far as tax abatement or things of that nature, and kind of go from there, and then make sure, like you said, if it's not going to happen. And I think one of the great things is when you look at some of the other communities, that your department's done a great job at making sure we're just not giving them out like candy.
Thank you.
And there are other communities, even being at the Municipal League this last week, many of them had said, how do you guys do it? I mean, we just, if you come in, it's really, hey, do you want a TIF? And so I think that it's something good that you're very conservative about it. I do have a question, though. Maybe it's online. All honesty, I haven't looked. But is there a maturity date listed online for these, as far as like TIF 5 will be mature in 2020 or whatever it is, just so we kind of know when they start falling off the books, so to speak, and that they're paid off?
Yeah, we estimate that there's a maturity amount more so than a maturity date, and that is based on fluctuations in property tax revenue that can swing it one way or the other. But we've generally keep a pretty good pulse and have a pretty good understanding of that. It is not online, but we are able to provide an update on that.
And then I have one more question. I some of the details are foggy on the Hidden Hills when we amended that. Because I don't see that we've amended any other ones. Will you talk to me a little bit about the details of that again, just to refresh my memory as far as, was it just too long and we had to amend it, or did the scope of the project change, or can you just remind me on that one?
Yeah, probably the biggest couple things with that project were, that was going to participate in a state program. And then, when some things happened there was a death by one of the original proposers of the project that changed things. And then ultimately a different property owner came forward, said, I can make it work, but I've got to change the scope. I've got to do a couple other things, and asked for it to be amended. So it originally, it's been long enough now, I forget the details on the original plan, but it did move from, I'd say a little less dense development to a more dense development with three-story apartment buildings.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we changed some of the boundaries too, I think, with some of that as well. So, okay. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. Any other questions, comments? Thanks for the 101. I know it's a simple yet complicated item that gets a lot of attention, and so I appreciate you being here and just re-educating us all on an annual basis. So thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting.